Hi, everyone. My name is Nitika, Sheth. I work on the product management team at Custora. Very excited to be here today. And as Sam mentioned, excited to bring you a session that is potentially a little bit more dramatic, purposefully provocative than what you've been hearing today. Also very lucky to be joined here by two extremely seasoned executives in the retail industry with experience at brands like Kenneth, Nike, Coach. We have TJ, who heads up the consumer to direct business at Kenneth, and Courtney, who heads up the merchandising org at Kenneth. Courtney and TJ are both merchants by trade and are going to be talking a little bit about how they've seen the role fundamentally change at the front lines and what that means for the retail industry moving forward. So with that, we're going to start off with a poll to get a sense of who's in the audience today. How many merchants or ex-merchants do we have with us in the audience?
We should have put wannabe merchants in there as well. Technology.
Okay, awesome. So actually more merchants than we expected, definitely more non-merchants in the room. So with that, we thought, quick agenda for today, we thought it would be helpful to start with a Merch 101 to just kind of ground ourselves into the conversation of what are merchants doing on a daily basis, what do they care about? We'll then start to talk a little bit about the cracks in the facade. So how is the role changing? Why does it kind of demand a new way of thinking and then unlocks for customer insights? So with that, I'm going to hand it over to the expert, Courtney, to give us a Merch 101.
All right, so Merchandising 101. I think that the traditional role of a merchant is really to be the hub of the organization. And on a daily basis, you're looking at every level of the product, from product lifecycle, product trends, product distribution, and how we use the information that we gather to impact the dynamics of our business decisions. I think that as we grow and evolve, we have to relook at that role, because as it so was eloquently put, the role of the merchant is dead, which was news that my boss shared with me a couple of months ago.
This is a true story.
Literally brought me aside along with the other merchants and said, if you don't evolve, you're out of a job. It's, tough after being in the business for 18 years. To hear that. And
it was a little softer than that, to be fair.
I don't know about that. He's pretty blunt.
In my head, I was projecting a very different disposition.
But yes, no, it was a jokingly loving moment about how we really needed to change the way we think, that our thought process can't just be around product, that it also needs to be centered around the customer and what they're looking for. So with that, the next slide, what do these people have in common? Well, they're all merchants. They were trained in the basic fundamentals of retail. They're also top leaders in their organization. And, really in the past, the path to becoming a senior leader in a company was really driven through the merchandising organization because we had the pulse on the business. We also drove or do drive the product decisions that are being shown to the consumer. We really represent what the brand wants to stand behind. But I think that as we continue to evolve, it's really taking that step back and understanding what the customer wants that product to look like versus us leading the product decisions. So the evolvement process, what has that looked like? Well, first, meeting with Custora and meeting with Nitika and truly understanding what she's had to offer us. There's definitely been some eye-opening moments as we've learned to read the information. But as a team, we really sat down together and said, what are the three most important questions that we need help with answering in order to really create that customer unlock? The first is, how much do we own? These are just basic questions that we ask ourselves on a daily basis. How much should we buy? And which items should we buy? Traditionally, this would have been a long hindsight process that the merchandising and planning team would have done together, really focusing on sell-throughs, AURs, gross margin, any sort of color trends, but not necessarily understanding who the customer is and also at what point in the product life cycle are they purchasing it. You know, are they purchasing it at full price? Are they purchasing it when we're having a friends and family event, or are they waiting for it to go on sale? Through the information that Custora has been able to share with us, you know, we've identified those 3 customer segments. The team from Vince already spoke to those, but, you know, really identifying who that full price customer is, who that discount opportunist is, who's occasionally looking to find a deal, and then our discount seeker, so someone who's shopping the site pretty regularly, but mainly in the sale section. Using that information, we've really been able to influence the way that the total organization is building the product, and also helping us to buy the merchandise, which is helping obviously to improve sell-throughs, gross margin, improving top line and bottom line, which is obviously, we all know, where it counts the most. So yeah. All right, now it's time for another poll. How many of you work closely with your merchandising team? I like where this is going.
It's job security, Courtney.
Cool. So I think this is going to be a great segue into our next section, where TJ is going to be talking a little about how the role is changing, how it sounds like a lot of you guys are already doing this, but how we can work together in organizations to kind of bring merchants along in the conversation of customer centricity and customer insight. So TJ, I can hand it over to you.
Yeah, sure. And I can be very dramatic, hence the title of the presentation. But the role of the merchant clearly isn't going anywhere. But the reality of that merchant and this skill set is going to look very different, is either starting to look very different or is very different, and more importantly, will be very different in the future. And that really has become a mandate. I think Robin alluded to it around the perfect storm. We are now in that new phase of being a customer-led industry, and where historically we've been so pattern-driven, supply-led organizations, more top-down, pushing down big themes, big brand ideas. And for the first time, that paradigm has shifted. Some things are happening, obviously, at a macro level for us at Kenneth Cole, and a lot of that is really the shift in consumers. So the first one for us, we've seen shortened product and trend life cycles. The second one, consumers now have endless choice, and to the points conversation, fractured loyalty. I think that the description or the definition of loyalty has really been disrupted because a lot of loyalty now has been monetized in a way that's really just about executing relative to an ROI, which we're finding as well. There is clearly the blurring of the physical and digital, and we laugh. We internally are calling it the digital, and some other brands have their own interpretation of what that means and the role of each of the channels, and that's really an overarching theme for us as we think about how we solve that problem. And then the fourth is curated for me. I didn't want to put personalized down because I don't know how many of you out there are sick and tired of hearing the term personalization. But the idea that we all do hold that device in our pockets that is giving us the ability to think very differently about your interaction, your experience with brands. It's less about that going into a physical store and understand what the brand stands for, how I should style things. Instagram, Pinterest, all of that has really disrupted the way consumers think about interacting with brands and why they want to interact with brands. And we're finding that at Kenneth Cole in a really overt manner. So what has that meant for us? So we have consumer we have a consumer disruption happening, which I just talked through. The implications for us as we think about changing our own model internally. The old school, and I love a from to slide, for those that have ever been or worked for Nike or been around Nike, we love from to slides. And so I had to steal a little bit of that, template, because it's really an impactful way of thinking about where you are, or where you were and where you're going. So from an old school perspective, we were very much product and category experts, or at least we thought we were. And the next generation is really getting into the product and customer expertise, which is hard. It's easy to say, hard to execute. The other part for us, we recognized pretty quickly that through those consumer-led implications and shifts, we were siloed, and a lot of our insights were siloed, meaning our customer insights held the information, and during certain moments of go-to-market would hand that off like a baton relay. The reality is we needed to shift to be more of a Spartan race, where everybody in the team is running the race together, and we are collating that information during that race to optimize the best opportunity for us to win. And that became for us a big unlock. We went from that silo to a more cross-functional decision-making process. The other thing within buying, merchandising, for the buyers out there, your lives are run by calendars, which sucks, because that's not the way the consumer buys their product. And so we had to pull back our own structured institutional calendar, fossilized calendar, and apply a more agile process and practice. This one was really hard, and I think for you specifically, with so much traditional buying, the fear comes out. Wait, what do you mean? We have to buy based off of these call dates. Right, but that's not the way consumers are buying. So why can't we shift our call dates to reflect when consumers are buying? We can do it, I think, and we did. And you were a great supporter of driving that process. And then lastly for us, this one's a big one for the merchants out there. I used to say this all the time, because a lot of my friends would ask me, what does a merchant do? I don't understand what a merchant does. And I was like, look, I know what consumers want because I got the gut. I got the instinct. I know what you want. I know I can predict latent demand. The reality is you can't, and that's hard. And now we have data to help shift that ideology to more instinct and analytics. So it's not just suggesting to merchants, hey, you can't be a great gut merchant. Mickey was a great gut merchant for 20 years, but he didn't evolve, and that was one of the points of showing that. A part of that evolution with a partner like Custora is amplifying the and proposition, taking instincts and analytics to help inform those decisions. All right, so the reason we bring this back up is because there's a clear bifurcation within the merchandising world and the community as you think about leaders and their paths towards to success. So Mickey and Michael grew up very traditional merchants, store backgrounds, went through some of those executive training programs, and they struggled to evolve. And the new guard, and Darcy and Joanna, grew up with elements of that very traditional merchandising background, but they also worked in digital-led organizations where data was put at the center of the decision-making process. And so you see old guard versus new guard, success versus failure. And it's not to say that Mickey was a failure. Clearly he is not. But evolving, the point of all of this is for someone like Courtney and even myself, we have to be open to the shift. We cannot lead through the lens of a fixed mindset. So that was a big one for this. Okay.
Sorry.
That's okay. You like the sky. I need to speed up. Am I
No, not at all.
I love a microphone. Okay, so we recognized we needed to change within the world of merchandising. We found a great partner to help us unlock that with Custora. But how do you take a wholesale-driven company, a legacy company like Kenneth Cole, and embed that new way of thinking grounded in data so that it's not about more work, it's about the amplification of existing work with a smarter, more informed decision-making process?
Cool. So that leads me to my next question, TJ. I think you laid out a very compelling reason for why we need to evolve the thinking. But I think it would be helpful for people in the room today to understand kind of tactically, how did you think about doing that within the Kenneth Cole organization, and where did you guys see the opportunities?
Yeah, so we probably, like some of you here, we have a go-to-market process that can be 90 weeks out, 60 weeks out, 52 weeks out from go live. And that's a lot based off of the inception of a concept, how that manifests itself through design and protoing and so forth. And eventually you get to the go live date. And what we found was we thought we could pick key moments in that go-to-market calendar that allow the data to be communicated in an impactful way that we believed would resonate with our constituents. So we picked very specific moments like showing who the consumer was during the first proto stage of product builds, and letting them know, in fact, this is who's buying men's Oxfords. This is who has a strong affinity towards saddle tan or black with white bottoms. We leveraged the power of Custora to help inform that proto process so that the designers, the global merchants, can hear that in real time. And that was a really powerful point of distinction for us in the go-to-market calendar. So what you see here is, for us, traditionally, it started with product. Then when we were handed the baton, traditionally in a go-to-market calendar, we now have to write an open-to-buy. We lead that open-to-buy through hindsight and assortment planning, and then we get into some of the indecision open-to-buy process based off of things are working or not working. What we did, too, with this process was we put the customer now at the head of the decision-making process versus margin, units, on hands, and that was a really significant paradigm shift. So much so that Kenneth now uses his Custora information. Yes, Kenneth is a man, he's still living. He uses this information on me all the time, and it's great to see. I feel somewhat betrayed by Custora and the information, but it's really powerful to hear Kenneth talk about who actually our customer is and why that's important relative to assorting down, standing for key items, having a point of distinction, changing the value proposition, which I loved to hear from Richard. That's really that was the unlock here for our go-to-market calendar.
Awesome. Courtney, maybe you could talk a little bit more in detail. So TJ talked about the go-to-market process, these key moments like open-to-buy, hindsighting, in-season decision-making. Would be helpful to talk about exactly how your team tackled each one of those and what you did.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the past, as I mentioned before, the decision-making process was really driven by the planning and the merchandising teams. And we would sit together, strategize in terms of, where are we seeing the business trend? Are we seeing it up this year? Are we seeing it down? I had information from the product development team in terms of overall product strategies that they were looking to develop into. So that would influence my decision-making process in terms of, they're seeing flats trend in women, so let's go ahead and push that category because we know that there's going to be a lot of product development within that section. So that was really the typical conversation. And I think that what was great is that we layered in the information from Custora as the additional filter in terms of let's not just focus on the product, but what is the customer actually looking for? Because, trends can vary pretty dramatically, and they can, hit you faster than you can see them coming at times. And through understanding what the customer was truly looking for, that's allowed us to build a more fluid process. And also with regards to actually the go-to-market process, when we had the Spring 20 footwear presentation back in August, we invited Nitika and a group of people from Custora to basically come in and present their findings. And there's a lot of things as merchants, you have that gut feeling. You're like, okay, pop colors should be selling like X, and these sizes sell out faster. But through the information that Custora was able to provide us, we were actually really, for once, able to know that it was tangible information, that it wasn't just gut, it was logic, it was data. And this is what, Kenneth does pull on us. He has the deck that Nitika presented, and it was also interesting to present back the assortment to Kenneth in a new way, because we specifically targeted what our full price customer was shopping for, what our discount opportunist was looking for, and then what our discount seeker. I mentioned that we're trying to improve our overall margins to increase bottom line. So if we know we're building product with some better margins in them for that discount seeker, we know that that's going to help our overall bottom line numbers as well.
This one, I want to give you a lot of credit here, Court. For the merchants out there, this one was a big moment, and where I think traditionally marketers will look at the different tiers of customers and immediately write off the lower performing or lowest value customers. We came about it a different way. We thought, well, why can't we take the 3 segments of customers? Why can't we build assortments to those customer bases and really myopically focus on then the product life cycle and the flow against those customers? And Courtney looked at me like, are you fucking kidding me? There's no way we're gonna be able to do this. And I remember Jordan and I having this conversation early on. There was the pause moment, which is good. That's the great, those moments are when you start to unlock the possibility. Courtney took that idea and ran with it, partnered with Nitika and team. And for the first time, holiday, we're testing some version of it. Spring 20, we built assortments at the customer segment level.
Yep.
Pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Wow. Cool.
And to be fair, my CEO, I'm gonna be really kind to him. He loved the idea of a CRM. What I find amazing about Custora and the Custora team here is it's not just a CRM. It's really about finding value within your organization led through customer insights. And I would have never thought that someone like a CRM partner could help us figure this out. It's very possible. And for our CEO who just thought putting a sheet of paper on a table during a board meeting and showing who our customer insights team, that was the win, to now building assortments relative to tiers of customers. He champions data, he champions technology, because he recognizes pretty quickly that we are living the future. To Robin's point, this audience here, we're creating it as we go.
Awesome. So apart from assortment planning, which has been huge, I also want to talk about demand forecasting for a second, because speaking about Spring 2020, your team, and specifically your planning team, also approached the concept of open-to-buy planning and demand forecasting from a completely different perspective, from a customer-driven perspective. So can you talk a little about how you guys approached that?
Sure. This was hard for. I don't think there are any planners here. Any planners in this audience? I'd be shocked. They're usually in the office, always.
Working.
There is a planner here? Did we get a hand? Oh, used to be a planner. Okay. So for something that's so historical and or empirical based, this was really hard for our planning team. really hard for our planning team. It felt really mushy and nebulous, but the willingness, the receptiveness to thinking differently about the business, that's where it started for our planning team. And Courtney was a great advocate on helping bring that individual and those individuals along on the journey so that it's not, and I alluded to this before, it's not about more work, it's about the amplification of existing work. It's about making your work more purposeful. It's about removing some of the friction in your own day, and that was a big unlock for our planner.
Awesome. So we talked about customer hindsighting a little bit, kind of beginning the go-to-market process of every season, not only dissecting product sales, but dissecting product sales through the lens of key customer segments. The third thing your team has been kind of really been relying on is this concept of in-season alerting. So everything we've talked about so far, open-to-buy planning, hindsighting, are key moments that happen once every couple months, once every 4 months. But how do you kind of stay in touch with the customer as the season progresses?
Yeah, so I think, Nitika's been a great partner with actually providing, and Leonora, with providing us these in-season alerts, which is basically on Mondays, we receive this dashboard. This is something that we are currently testing and providing.
Leo's somewhere here, yeah.
She's over here. Okay, great.
My favorite email.
So we're currently testing this. It's focused primarily on men's footwear at this point in time. It's our largest penetrated business, something that we want to make sure that we're focusing on. But this gives us a snapshot for the week before and also how it compares to last year. And as we look to see how a promotion did for us, or if we're targeting more full price customers that week, this is our report card basically for how we did for that very week. So
great. So we're ending here with an amazing quote from TJ himself up on the screen. I have one last question for you two, which is, I think this is pretty game-changing for a lot of people. Customer insights is something that's a day-to-day part of the marketing org. It potentially feels a little bit scary to bring it into the merchandising, the planning piece. So what advice do you have for folks in the room, for organizations who are kind of just starting to think about incorporating customer insights into this part of the organization?
Goodness, it's scary. I have to be honest. These are new terms that, as a merchant, I was not familiar with at all. So for me, it was a little bit of a slow process as I tried to understand what we were trying to get after, what information we were trying to glean from the data that was provided. And I think that it took just constant communication with you to make sure that I was understanding what was provided. Because without understanding the very basics of where we started, from demand forecasting to the seasonal hindsight to the in-season alerts, and now we actually just received survey results back. It's like a building blocks approach. Like, you really have to understand the fundamentals before you understand how you can use that information. So yeah, that was my biggest takeaway.
Great.
Yeah, I think the first step for teams that they're going through this, for us as the leader, I immediately just decentralize the data. That is step one. Bring the whole team together. Leverage Custora and the partnership, bring them in, decentralize the data, have an entire group conversation about what's going on in your business. That's step one. Get people familiar with terms, get people familiar with what it means, promote a lot of questions, and from there, I promise you'll be off and running.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.